Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to No Capes, the show where we talk about creator-owned comics with creators who own comics. With me today is Liz Malette. Liz, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about your work?
So I'm Liz. I'm a comic artist who currently lives in Toronto, Canada. I grew up on the East Coast, kind of find myself drawn to a lot of science fiction comics. I also really enjoy horror comics, a lot more. Um, I'm one of those people who grew up in anime and manga, so I've gone a lot in that train, but a lot of that inspires me. Recently, we were in, we're both in. I'm sure you've mentioned it many times, but the Starless Daydream,
Yes,
both
I,
in,
I have mentioned it
and
many times, but I never get sick of it because it's going to be an amazing book.
yeah, I'm so excited for it. And then also, a Kickstarter I was in recently actually just funded. So that's a cold dark future, which is
Oh, I think
by
I
Black
saw that.
Hole Comics. Yeah. So it's a new publisher. This will be their first anthology, and so I'm making a book with Gabe Gonzalez about giant robot animals floating through space that people live on. And it's a little bit of mecha, a little bit of Ghibli, Studio Ghibli inspired, lots of just kind of melding together of different things that I'm pretty excited to make.
That sounds really cool. If you hadn't told me that it was somebody else, I would have said that that's got Frankie White all over it.
I mean, I connected with Frankie for a reason.
Yeah, I think I first connected with Frankie over Broken Bear,
Okay.
and then we just started chatting, and then he's like, "Hey, I'm doing this anthology. You want to do a page?" I'm like, all right, tell me more.
Yeah, no, that book was a great project, and when I saw his original post looking for someone to make a mech comic, I had at the time like really the only large comic project I had done at that time was like a self-written piece that was about a mech pilot and their mech, and so it was kind of like, hey, pick me. And we ended up
Yeah,
talking more, and I ended up doing the one page illustration.
yeah, yeah. Same. I did the a 1 page of the sequentials,
Hmm.
and it was a real challenge because I've never really worked in solid black and white.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's very different than working in color for sure.
yeah, I actually forgot that I didn't need to color it at first, at one point, and then Frankie's like, "Oh no, that just needs to be black and white." And I was like, "Oh, I need to learn how to use screen tones real quick."
Screen tones. I do love screen tones. I got
Yeah, I'm
pretty
having a
excited
lot of
about my
fun
screen
playing with it.
tones. Yeah.
I'm actually that's how I'm coloring. I think you saw the pinup that I started working on, but it's been sidelined a little bit with day job work of Fuku.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah.
that's how I'm actually doing the full colors instead of doing like a normal airbrush color the way I usually do. I'm airbrushing it with screen tones.
Yeah. Yeah, you could do some really cool things with screen tones with digital art now.
Yeah, it's been really fun, sort of experimenting and learn and starting to push the limits of Clip Studio and the brushes that I've got and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and Clip Studio's made like so well for that. It's a
It's
really natural process once
It
you get used
really
to it.
is. It's so powerful for what it does. And oh yeah, actually, for anyone watching right now who is an artist who either is already a digital artist or who wants to uh, try digital art, allow me to send you a link in the chat because Clip Studio is having one of their famous 50% off sales right now.
Oh yeah, and it's it's one of those things where it's kind of like don't. It's an amazing product, but don't buy it for full price because it
Yeah,
goes on sale so
yeah, it goes on
regularly.
sales very regularly, so if you can, always hold off for one of these sales. I got Clip Studio X on sale so that I can do the
Yeah,
animation and have all the 3D model tools and all that sort of stuff. But it's also
yeah,
specifically for the comic export for printing functionality.
yeah. It does some
Yeah,
pretty great page
because it's
management. Blah.
yeah, it's got really great process management. Because I use it for laying out all of my RPG stuff as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's just I can just set it to a page size and just start making everything in there. It's great. But today,
That's
for anyone who hasn't read it before, we are talking about Harrow County, which is written by Cullen and Bunn with art by Tyler Crook, and I think a few guest artists on covers across the series as well from memory.
hmm
And it's a really good book. It's one of the more fun, like it's not fun, but fun to read horror books that I've read in recent years. I haven't read the whole series for a little while. Refreshed myself on it this week, but it's a really good book, and it's. Let me just grab the Comixology link and dump that in the chat as well, because it's 99 cents an issue right now on Comixology.
Oh, nice.
And the I think the first volume is only like $5.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah. I mean, this is one of those comics where I'm like very weird about horror in general. I don't like movies or television shows like at all, but I actually really enjoy a lot of horror video games
Okay.
and comics. Um, and I feel like Harrow County like really hits a sweet spot for me of a person who like likes the creepy monster supernatural stuff but isn't necessarily here for like the like thrill rush of being scared out of my pants.
Yeah, yeah.
um
I found that, especially like as we get through it, we're probably mostly just going to focus on issue one today for those in the chat. We may or may not discuss some spoilers because the whole series has been out for a little while now, but we'll try to give you a bit of a warning beforehand. But yeah, the ending of issue one is interesting
what is the
on
ending again?
the note of being scared out of your pants and really creepy moments.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it. So we'll come to that as we go through. So what we're going to do for anyone who's new to No Capes is I've actually got the book, not just an image of the cover. It's actually the book from as a window capture. So we're going to flick through the book as we talk and discuss what we like about it. It's great that like smack bang there on the cover is that pull quote from Mike Mignola. That like it's a that's a sell for me.
Yeah, it's a good summary of the books too, because it is really wonderfully charming at the same time as being a little bit disturbed.
It is. Tyler's
Um,
art is just perfect for this book.
oh
Um,
yeah,
the
it was the main initial draw for me was Tyler's art. It's like definitely a big inspiration to me as an artist is his style, but
Yeah, his sort of digital watercolory type style that he's got going, it really I love it. I can't do it, and it's not my personal style. I would love to learn how to do it just so I can, but I love reading books in this style.
yeah. And if you ever that it is he actually does like it's all traditional watercolors.
Is it? I
And
wasn't sure whether he did
yeah.
it digitally or not.
Um if you ever have a chance, when he's at shows, well, I mean, when there are shows again in the future,
And if any
I had.
Australian shows ever bring him over here, if you're watching
Well,
this Oz
yeah.
Comic Con, I'm talking to you.
I mean, you should. He's good. He's great. I had an opportunity to like see some of his stuff in person at Toronto Comics Art Festival in 2019, I
Yep.
guess it would have been. Um, and they're just like, um, they're huge. They're massive
Oh,
pages.
cool.
And they're gorgeous, and there's so much detail into them. And he's like, the craftsmanship there is something else.
Yeah, that sort of reminds me of something that Ted and Ro from Crowded were telling me about when they came on. Apparently, when they're over in Europe, they went to Thought Bubble last year, I think it was, and there was this massive comics art exhibition at a museum nearby.
Ooh,
But
yeah.
it was like not just traditional sort of comics art, but also some really experimental, experiential exhibits where
Oh, that's really awesome.
the panels were like gigantic size, the size of doors and stuff, and like hanging from the roof. And so you'd walk around and read all the panels.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. That
And
sounds so rad.
yeah, and apparently there was one like it was a very short comic, but there was like a mini comic that was completely illustrated in blood,
Oh, wow.
and like there were big, big pieces too. Apparently,
Oh, wow.
so
That's
like
intense.
yeah, they were getting really experimental with it. It sounds fascinating. Like apparently it's like a permanent comics art museums over there. I can't remember
I'll have
exactly where they said it was right now, but it sounded really interesting.
I'll have to make sure to look that up.
But yeah, yeah, Cullen is one of my favorite authors for this kind of story, and Tyler's work, especially now that I know that it's all traditional as well. I'd seen a lot of his work around, but I hadn't investigated far enough to see that it was all done manually. I can't watercolor to save my life, so uh, anyone that can make a possible watercolor is beyond impressive. Let alone that can do this level of work. I tell you, someone else whose work is really nice in person is Al Barrionuevo, the artist for Astonisher.
Okay, yeah.
He was at they brought him over for Supernova last year, and his pencils look phenomenal in person. There's so much little intricate details and stuff in it. It's just wonderful to look at.
It's wild to see some of these pages in person and just see what like of like all sorts of different comics and just see what goes into the process of like people who are making things traditionally.
Right? Because like I mostly do my full coloring and stuff digitally, but I'm trying to push myself a bit more to do more traditional art. But finding the time is the hard part for me because I don't do it very often. It takes me a really long time to get it done, and so
Yeah.
when I'm trying to get things finished and pushed out for publishing, I'm like, I'd better do it the fast way.
Yeah. Yeah, it can
But
be hard when you're like you want to experiment with new things, but you have this pile of stuff that you're trying to get done, and you're just like, I can only do I have option one or option two. I can't do both.
yeah, that's why I sort of I compromised for Starless Daydream, and I penciled traditionally, and then inked digitally.
Okay.
I wanted to do the inks traditionally if I could, but then I like knew what Frankie's rough deadline was, and also I had two other projects on. Uh, no, let's bash this out. And thankfully, just as I sat down to start inking it, my new drawing tablet arrived.
Oh, nice.
So that sped things up considerably. I'm just noticing, interestingly, I just wanted to double check that I'd remembered that right. That yeah, Tyler did the lettering as well.
Uh, I don't know. I know that there's a lot of hand lettering throughout the books.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just checking. Like here it says
Um,
that Tyler did the coloring, the pencils, and the lettering.
yeah, that wouldn't surprise me to know that he did the lettering also. There's a lot of I mean, if you go, oh, I guess it's actually several pages in. Oh, it's like the third page of fifth page of the book. Is he every book starts with that great 2-page spread that he does, and somewhere in there is the hand lettered title Harrow County.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love the lettering that he's chosen for it too. Um, it's again something that I discuss a few times on the show with the letter in regards to lettering and stuff. Is that like good lettering is invisible in a way.
Yeah,
Like you don't. It's not that you ignore it, but good lettering merges with the art and the story so seamlessly that it enhances the experience and you don't notice it while you're reading.
yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah,
that's
good design doesn't intrude on you.
yeah. And every time I go back to go through the book bit by bit for the show, I really notice what I liked about the lettering again because I don't notice it in the moment. But bad lettering, you notice
Yeah, for sure.
because it pulls you out of the moment. It fractures that suspension of disbelief. And I haven't read many comics that I thought had bad lettering, to be honest, thankfully.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been pretty fortunate that like especially over the past several years, but like letterers. Wow, that word is hard for me to say for some reason. Letterers are like getting a lot more acknowledgement and appreciation insofar as like people are actually realizing that, hey, you know, don't just get your artists to do the letters on your book if they're not a letterer. Like some artists are really great at that, and other times, like there's
Yeah,
people who do that for a living and they do an amazing job.
right? I tell you who I would really love to have for the anthology I'm trying to work on for next year is Hassan from Strip Panel Naked.
Yeah.
His lettering is phenomenal. I think he's doing the lettering for Engineward at the moment,
Okay.
if I remember rightly, because I remember seeing him sharing some lettering he was working on, and I think that's what it was from. And it's just so good. It he works it into the artwork itself as well, like the sound effects and stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's really great. There was a specific example where he did like this giant sandworm taking a bite out of someone, and like the sound effect for the bite is going through the split body,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and it was just great. But I'm also again really envious of people who can letter as well as they can draw. In this case, like
It,
Tyler.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, yeah, I think Tyler and Cullen work together really well in so far as like I think they both like flex a lot of their muscles
Oh,
as far as
yeah,
creative scope because they just put it all out there. They're just like, this is a good book and we're gonna make a good book.
exactly. And so for anyone who hasn't read it, Harrow County is uh, sort of a witch story. It's a supernatural book that follows the story of Emmy Crawford, um, who, as we go through the book, um, people are starting to make comments about her and her history. And so I'm not going to spoil it too much just yet. If you haven't read the book, we'll let you know a bit more about that in a minute. And you can head off and read it and come back and watch the YouTube version. But it opens here with the townspeople standing at the execution of a witch, Hester Beck. And they even say, like, during her life, she'd been a healing person. But then the people started noticing that things started getting a bit darker with the way that she practiced this magic. And obviously, people being panicky animals that they are, they didn't like that very much. And I think it's the second page that amazing Minotaur Devil Baphomet beast is just fantastic design. I love the way it looks.
It's is such a good character design, yeah.
Yeah, I that creature appears more throughout the rest of the book, and I just love it. I love getting to know it more and just seeing more of it. The design in general is good, but I feel like if anybody else drew it, it wouldn't feel the same.
Yeah, for sure. It's very much captured like in a particular way by Tyler's his ink work and his watercolors and kind of the way he plays that out. And there's some gorgeous spreads
Yeah, there
that he
really are.
has.
And even when the subject matter is kind of nasty, um,
Yeah.
the artwork itself is fantastic. Like even this top panel here. Also, I love that Tyler doesn't frame the panels on some of these pages.
Yeah,
Like,
he does a good job of like being intentional about when he is and isn't going to frame things to give us a sense of like to as like a storytelling tool.
yeah, and it's like, yeah, when even just here the juxtaposition between the viewpoints, essentially, like these harsh framed with the clean white background panels are more indicative of the hard line of the townspeople's viewpoint. But when it's more about Hester going about her business, we've got this more organic, unframed, sort of fluctuating border of the watercolors itself, and it really sort of
Yeah.
turns it about who's in control there. And just that top panel with the cows bloating and dying as Hester walks through, it's a hideous scene, but the artwork is phenomenal.
Hmm.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
if that was a photograph, it would turn your stomach.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean he also does some interesting things of like playing with the mood too, right? Because it's very like it's a very warm panel. It's kind
It
of
is.
inviting even, and you get drawn right in, and then you're confronted by what's going on there.
Yeah, like she looks like she's having a great time. She's just going for a nice walk in the sun.
Yeah.
I like even the panel with the beast. Like what's happening in the artwork is kind of directly contrasting to what the caption says. You know, they're talking about blasphemous Congress with heinous things, but everything about that panel says love and caring.
Yeah, it's quite
Like,
tender the way that
yeah,
they're interacting.
she's being very, very gentle with the way she approaches that creature, which, you know, leads you to believe it could be something else entirely. It could be a pet, it could just be something that she's rescued, is nursing back to health. You don't know. And I feel like, you know, that's a really interesting choice by Tyler there to contrast those things, because what they're saying and what you're seeing are two completely different ideas, which is often the truth with closed-minded viewpoints and new and different and unknown things. what
Yeah,
someone thinks
absolutely.
they're seeing and what they're actually seeing are completely different. Which I suppose is how, witches came to be witches and all
Yeah.
of that stuff happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, like, I think you can tell a lot in this book that Tyler and Cullen worked together pretty closely on the writing of it. Like,
Yeah.
um, Cullen and Tyler, like, very much, um, the storytelling process is really, to me at least, natural feeling insofar as like what they're able to achieve.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. It flows really well and it feels organic the way everything plays out and the way it looks. This scene again as well on the next page where they finally decide to set Hester alight. Again, it's a terrifying scene, but that panel is just so interesting to look at.
Yeah,
It's so
yeah,
engaging and vibrant.
and it pulls your eye right there on the page. Like it's very much, um, people talk a lot about a sense of time in a comic page, and
Yeah,
like
yep.
how do you achieve that sense of time? And this like contrast between kind of the cold, more dark pages of like the villagers in the rain, the townspeople in the rain, contrasted by this like super warm, bright panel of her being burned. And it draws your eye there, and it makes you want to stay there. Like you spend time in that moment. Like
Yeah,
everyone in that moment is also spending time in that moment.
yeah. And every time I read this issue, the first thing I see on that page is always that panel.
Yeah.
I'm not even looking for it, but as soon as I flip the page, it's just like looking at that panel, and it's like, crap, what's going on? And then you immediately want to know how it got there and start tracking through the rest of the page again.
Yeah, it's quite interesting too as a panel insofar as like it's very sparse on like the use of true black. Like a lot of
Yeah,
it's quite low contrast overall, but it's immediately recognizable just in like the economy of um line used for like the eyes and the mouth. Just immediately make it recognizable as a face.
yeah.
Um, so it draws
Um,
you in and you spend time there, but it tells you exactly what it is really
yeah,
quickly.
exactly. Like you immediately know exactly what's happened, even if you don't look at the rest of the page yet.
Yeah.
It gives you all the information you need to know. Like obviously she's just been set on fire, and
Yeah.
um, yeah, and then for the audience, you're not going to be able to see this properly because of the cropping, because it's a double page spread. But on this next page is, yeah, it is that hand. Oh, there we go. That
Yeah.
hand lettered title
You can't quite
hidden
see
in
it
the
there. Yeah.
storm, and this flash forward to years later, and what's left of the tree.
Yeah, and we're quite obviously presented with this like this massive wound in the tree.
Yeah,
Like it's immediately obvious that something's not wrong, and as soon as we turn the page, that's mirrored in, we meet Emmy for the first time, and it's immediately mirrored in kind of her body language and the way she's first introduced to us.
yeah, exactly. Like you can tell that she's just sat up with a start, and in that second panel, her face, the concern and dis- yeah, the disturbance is just visible in her expression.
Yeah, yeah, and it is. it's interesting because there's some like not extremely exaggerated, not like cartoonishly over exaggerated expressions,
Yeah,
but some like quite distinct expressions, along with some like very subtle facial language insofar as like that second panel we see that she's like really uncomfortable, but it's quite subtly told to us that she's very uncomfortable
yeah,
with.
it is. It's not a really extreme expression of revulsion or anything like that. It
Yeah,
is quite a subtle expression, but there's the hints of water welling up in her eyes, and just the set of her mouth, and everything just goes to like, no, I didn't enjoy whatever that was.
yeah, yeah, and it draws us in for like we're going through, you know, we've I think we've experienced this moment, and then we're drawn into her mind, and we see what she was actually seeing before. Like we turn the page and we see what she was actually seeing before she woke up,
Yeah,
and that moment of like again like the very high contrast in style and color, and are like quite jarringly confronted by this new image.
yeah, and there's the second last panel there of the shadows appearing. Oh, thank you, new follower. Yeah, the shadows appearing, but like, are they there? Is this something that Emmy is imagining?
Yeah, we're getting spooked by the spooks.
Yeah, and this
We
is where
we
we first hear about the Haints.
yeah. We pretty like we pretty immediately just jump right into the everything is unsettled, and we're not really ready for whatever's coming.
Exactly. And yeah, we flip over to the next page where she's staring out the window at that tree, and we get that close up of the tree, and it looks like the tree is in distress as well. It's split straight down the middle, and they're
Yeah,
talking about how they tried to fill in the hollow, and like, obviously this is also a panic move by the townspeople, because it says there, the cavity had been filled to keep the wound from spreading. That's not how trees work.
yeah,
Pouring concrete in a tree doesn't stop rot from spreading.
yeah. So like, what exactly were they actually trying? What actually was the wound?
Yeah,
And
what were they accomplishing here?
and also like, what is Emmy's connection to the
Yeah,
tree and the wound?
exactly. But I really love how Tyler has depicted the tree there, because like, it's got the branches spread out wide, and it's like leaning backwards, and that split is going from root to tip, and it looks like the tree itself was in pain.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
It's
Um,
surprisingly emotive for a tree.
yeah, and I think he kind of uses his medium pretty well of insofar as like we're given to the like textures of the watercolor in the background give us this like foreboding sense of storminess, and then also he brings in some white gouache to like very emphasize and pull the tree forward. So like
Yeah,
there is the contrast on the page is pretty low, but the tree is still like very presented in such a way that it's really all that you look at on that page. Like you
yeah.
don't get drawn in anywhere you're not supposed to.
No, and yeah, that's really clever the way he's done that with the white as well. Because I was noticing how dynamic the tree was in the foreground, and just as you were starting to mention it, I was looking at the sort of the grey that he's brought in at the back of the tree to separate it from the forest behind it. And then as soon as you mentioned the white, I looked and I could see all those little edges, the little halo that he's
Yeah.
given it, and it works to great effect. I
Yeah,
actually
and
really like that
he
a lot.
doesn't overdo it. He doesn't overdo it insofar as to like make it really stand out in a way that's distracting. Like it is, like not something that you immediately notice unless you're spending a lot of time just looking at the page and deconstructing it.
Yeah, it's very subtle, but it's very effective.
Yeah.
Oh, this is cool. I like the this next page where we're seeing what she saw in her dream.
Yeah, and
And
this was the page I was referring to before where it's kind of like we're set into this mood and then confronted by what was actually going on.
yeah, yeah, we're shown that she was unsettled, and then suddenly, bam! Here's what she was unsettled by.
Yeah.
And like the tree's got the teeth going, and the vines are whipping around. And,
Yeah, the wound is very much something more. It's so much more horrific than we first see it.
yeah,
And um I think you mentioned Hisanui earlier. He has like he does a breakdown at one point of talking about horror comics and kind of the effect of that, like um how one of the few times you can kind of take your reader by surprise is that page turn.
yeah,
And it's not that we're necessarily like we're not given a jump scare, we're not taken like suddenly taken by surprise in any way, but we are very much more suddenly presented with this idea of what she's presented with, almost as if it's kind of just a flash of what's going on in her head.
yeah, exactly. And it's that one page, and it's gone. And I feel like if they'd lingered on that for more than one page, it wouldn't have had as much effect.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's immediately back to that somber, more washed sort of color scheme as she lays down and tries to convince herself that it wasn't real
Yeah.
and go back to sleep.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. It's not real. It's not important. But yeah, the much more somber tones. It's interesting because we have a few different moods throughout the book insofar as like the way he uses watercolors, but a lot of it is very it's very muted. It's quite soft, and like really a lot of the contrast is kind of flat, like not so flat that things are unreadable. Like he still has effective contrast, but our range of tones are quite more muddy. Like it's very natural.
Mm.
Um, and it's very effectively used to like give us a sense of where we are, but then also to contrast against the things that are extremely dark, like the beast, or extremely jarring, like these like super neon flames at different points.
Yeah, no, he's got his own visual language, and
Yeah,
it's really
absolutely.
wonderful to look at. Again, like I'm loving this the final page here again, where now that you've mentioned it, I'm noticing the white rim on the
Mhm.
tree that separates it from the background.
Yeah, and he uses that effect like quite well to emphasize things throughout, and you kind of um it's not ever used too much. It's not like something he does all over the place. Anytime there's a dark background that kind of collides against a dark figure, it's not necessarily being used. It's being used exactly when it needs to
Exactly.
communicate what it needs to us.
Yeah, no, it's used only to enhance things that are supposed to be the focus, things that need to
Yeah,
be
exactly.
enhanced.
Yeah,
But again, it's
exactly.
also done in just in such a subtle way that you don't really pay attention to it. And then we get to the next page where things are starting to look a little brighter. there's still sort of a somber tone, but the colors are a little brighter, the lighting is a little lighter. It is daytime now, but in other books you can still see there are daytime scenes that are still super grayed out and dark, but here it's very much a daytime scene on the farm.
Yeah, and it has that kind of the what I mentioned, that sense of like muddiness of like everything feels natural. It's not super vibrant, but it is like it's warm. It gives us a sense of where we are. It kind of almost it it almost like kind of lulls us a little bit at the same
Mm,
time as like I think some of the ways that he draws faces are kind of unsettling, like the father in the third panel, like
yeah,
just there's something unsettling about his face in that moment where we're just kind of given a sense that something's not quite right here.
yeah, everything's a bit exaggerated and it looks a little bit sinister.
Yeah.
Like, it's not over overly so, but there's that sense of something. From the first page, we see his face where it's just quite, he's a bit sunburned, and he's obviously worked on the farm for a long time. Just to how harsh his nose and cheeks are drawn there.
Yeah, exactly. We get much more of a sense of like kind of the way he's aged. And yeah, it also kind of contrasts of just the like, it's a moment where he's teasing Emmy about about not really anything consequential, and they're
Yeah,
kind of having like a small moment. And so it's kind of like not really like there's more going on with the townsfolk, and we're
yeah,
kind of
exactly. There's
it's kind of
obviously,
just carrying on that sense.
yeah, there's obviously something else behind everything.
Yeah.
And then we get this next page again, going from that bright and sunny thing to suddenly there's something very, very wrong with this calf. And then
Yeah.
Emmy finds a trail leading off into a different part of the barn. And we get that close up of her face where she looks just shocked by whatever she's seen.
Yeah, when she's rounding that corner and she's confronted um by what's obviously a horrific sight, and it sets up very well like kind of where we're going in the immediate, next few pages.
Yeah. And just a quick warning for anyone in the chat: the pages are going to get a bit gorier from here out. So if that is an issue for you, consider yourself warned. Um, yeah, and obviously here is that messed up calf that's got too many legs and too many lumpy bits that where there shouldn't be lumpy bits.
Yeah, we're given the indication that it's dead, and Pa gives us the indication that the other one's not too far behind, and we're it's grim. It's not looking great.
No, and it's obviously not like that's not normal. Like a calf dying isn't unusual. These things like that happen on the farm, but a calf with 6 legs and a hunchback dying,
Yeah.
or even existing in the first place, is a lot more unusual. And then we go back to Emmy comforting the other calf as Pa's loading the gun.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all it's the several pages are just leading up to where this is going. We're distressed, Pa's distressed, Emmy's distressed. Even the cow is distressed.
Yeah,
We get the big noise at Emmy for like interacting with this sick calf.
yeah. And actually, I love the way that Tyler has like use different. I'm not sure whether he's just used different types of inks or different mixture of ink and watercolor black here, but like the edging of the lettering stands out against the darker black of the background,
Oh yeah, for sure.
and like it would have been very easy to just lose that edging and use the same inks, but he made a choice to ink it with something else so that it stands out because there's a different texture there.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, I'm glad that he did because it would be fine having just the borderless yellow there, but I feel like it has a little bit more of an impact because you can see the shape. He chose to shape that edging the way he did, and obviously he did that for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean he's very intentional, like um I mean watercolors are kind of an unforgiving medium. Like as a medium, I think a lot of it is um being okay with the ways you're out of control.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's hard to say that he's necessarily really intentional about what he's doing because watercolor isn't necessarily like that as a medium, but like he is. He's very intentional about the way he's doing everything on his pages.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's always that he understands that, and he chooses to work with that mix of actual ink and watercolor to get that depth of page.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's funny that you mentioned that as well. Actually, my partner and I were talking about that the other day, and they were saying that why do people give watercolors to kids? Watercolors are
Yeah,
hard, man. Like high quality watercolors are hard, let alone those cheap little stacking discs of sandy watercolor
yeah, the
that
pucks.
everyone gives us when we first start saying we want to be artists when we're 10 years old.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think part of it is just that like watercolors are hard to use, but also watercolors are easy to use. You just take this puck and you put some water on it with a brush, and then suddenly you have colors on a page. But also, you know, you. I think a lot of times as artists, we get so, especially like when we're working in digital all the time, we get so caught up in this like intense control of what we're
Mm-hmm.
creating that as soon as we try to use a medium like watercolors, it gets quite, you know, that splotchy edge just doesn't look exactly the splotchy way we want it to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, exactly that. And yeah, Tyler just seems to know what he's doing and can handle that chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean he can one of the things that I love about this series is in the back of every volume um the first volume has a script. There's another volume I have here that has stuff. In the back of every volume, they share like process work. Oh yeah, here this is a good one of just like you can see. Um, my camera's not going to pick it up well enough to like read or anything, but you can see like this is his process of making this one specific color page and getting a sense of like how how does he do this and what mediums does he use and how exactly is it that he has so much control. And they really the both Cullen and Tyler, like both writing and character development, they like are quite happy to let you look under the hood and share like, hey, this is what we did to get here.
Yeah, I really appreciate that too. Like process is always really interesting, whether you are a fellow creator or not. And it's just really nice to be able to see under the hood and see all of the work that goes into the thing that you just enjoyed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I don't think people I don't think people who don't work in comics necessarily appreciate quite how much work goes into comics, you know.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like I'm working on a 3-page comic right now that I started at the start of last year.
Yeah.
But, again, obviously, other work takes priority, but also, it's a lot of work, and you've got to make sure it looks right, or it's not going to be a good read.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you get that. I think you get that moment with you'll see some graphic novelists, like some artists making graphic novels on Twitter every so often having that moment of being like, wow, I spent a year and a half of my life making this book that a person's gonna read in an hour and a half.
Yep, yep, that's it. Like this, yeah, this thing's 3 pages long, and I like actual working time. I reckon I've probably spent about 3 months solid on it
Right, yeah.
because, like, I started it, and then I had a catastrophic tablet failure,
Oh no.
and I lost it. And so then I managed to thankfully have sent my buddy who wrote it screenshots along the way.
Right.
And so I had to take those screenshots and then rebuild all the layers and start drawing over the top of it again.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the other thing is just the like the more reliant we get on doing things digitally and kind of that process, the easier it is to, it's all ephemeral electrical pulses,
Yeah,
off in the ether. So easy for that to disappear if we're not being super intentional about it.
exactly. And yeah, for me especially, and anybody else watching who might have ADHD, hit save right now.
Hit save, take a drink of water,
Yeah, back it up
back
to
up
the
your
cloud,
files.
maybe save it on a hard
Yeah,
drive.
yeah,
But yeah, that was a disastrous day for me mentally. I was like, what just happened? And so then I put it down for like 6 months and didn't touch it again.
yeah. And
I
I mean
was,
that's fair. It's
yeah,
crushing when you lose that much work.
yeah. And I was studying at the time as well. So, like a combination of that blow plus having assignments to do, I was just like, "Mm, this needs to go to the bag." And then, of course, 2020 happened.
Oh yeah,
And it's been chaos. It's been like, over here, at least on this end, it's been brilliant chaos, as well as all of the stress of this year. But it's just meant that all of the projects that I've done, and not necessarily all the projects that I was planning,
yeah, for sure.
because things change. Obviously, this year, a lot of things have changed for everyone, and you just got to kind of go with the flow.
Yeah, this year has definitely been an extra exercise in planning less and doing more. I think
Yeah,
a lot of people have kind of, they're planned way ahead and all of those plans are kind of gone and we don't know when they'll get picked back up. So we just kind of
yep,
have to do what we're doing in front of us and
yeah,
accept that. And
that's
you know,
exactly
like,
it. Like, I didn't have this show planned at the start of this year. Like,
really,
originally, this show was just me sitting in front of a camera after I'd read a book doing a review.
right.
And then I was getting frustrated with not having enough time to sit down and plan everything and edit and stuff around uni and around my day job and all that sort of thing. I recorded my first episode about Resonant, and then I was starting to watch it back, and I'm like, why did you record this so late at night, you dickhead? You just garbled like 10 words. Alright, let's take that down, and we'll re record this later. And then one day I was just talking to Frankie, and I had an idea, and I was like, hey, Frankie, do you want to come on Twitch with me and just talk about a book? Like, not even a review. Let's just talk about a book that we've both read and like, and why we want to tell people about it.
Yeah.
And like I did that with Frankie. That episode has been lost to the ether because somehow I stuffed up and I balked his audio. But it was that discussion and how much fun we both had with it, and how it was very different for a creator to have that chance to talk about something that's not their work, because obviously most comic creators are used to being interviewed about what they're working on right now and having to
Yeah.
sell themselves, and they don't get to just gush about something they really like very often.
Yeah, it's great to have opportunities to just gush about things you like on the internet.
Right?
It's maybe the
And
best part of the internet.
exactly, exactly. And that's what I wanted to do, because the whole reason I wanted to start No Capes wasn't for my sake, but to promote all these amazing indie titles to people who might not pick up anything that's not a Marvel or a DC book otherwise, just because they don't know what's out there and they've never been introduced to it or told about it. So why would they pick it up? They don't know what it's about.
Yeah, and I mean,
And
there's so much. There's such a massive world of books to read that are outside of those Cape comics from the big two, and it's really exploding right now.
it really is, and
And
that's exactly what I wanted to do. Like I looked at it and I'm like, nah, there's enough cis white dudes talking about superheroes on the internet. I don't need to be doing that. Let's give creators a platform to come on and just talk about stuff that they like, and as we discovered at the start of the show and everything, talking about what my guests are working on and have done and how they work and stuff comes up naturally as we go along.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
I really enjoyed it, and then that's what this became. And then since then, I've done an episode almost every week, except for when time zones didn't work out. And so that
Time zones almost didn't work out today.
it's true, almost. But I'm really glad it did, because I've been looking forward to this episode for ages. So I'm really
I'm
glad that
glad.
it still worked out.
I've been excited to talk about this book. It's because it is genuinely one of my favorite books. And I
It,
mean, it's funny because this book for me was I was talking about a friend or with a friend about a project that we were thinking about doing together. And I was kind of like, okay, well, like, what are when you think about this project, like, what are the books that you think about that you um have the visual language that give the story in your brain life. And this is one of the books he told me about, and this is like it's the only reason that I know this book is because we started talking about this project. um, and it very much changed. It changed a lot of like the way I was looking at comics at the time. Like I am someone who has worked in watercolors a lot. I don't tend to make comics in watercolors because it's a lot of work, and I just haven't really had the process for it. Um, but I always pick this book back up and look back at this book, and I'm like, this is work that I want to make. This
yeah,
is this is doing things that I want to try. This is a medium that I love, um, and like is a big part of why I love this series so much. And this, it helps that the story is amazing, and like the places that this book goes um, are really fun and interesting. Like not fun in like a happy way necessarily. Like
no,
there's a
but
lot of
exciting.
grimness to the series, but yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah,
And I
and I've
think that the oh,
sorry,
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, no, you go. I cut you off.
I was gonna say I think that the progression of Emmy's story as a protagonist throughout all of this, like in just this first book, is very interesting. But then as soon as you span out through the whole series to see its end, we go on quite a roller coaster, and she
Yeah,
goes some really interesting places.
it really does. Like where she ends up was not actually what I expected to be the thing. It's not what they were setting up.
Yeah,
Well, it's not what they made us think they were setting up.
yeah, absolutely.
And it
Yeah, and
was It's just got phenomenally more interesting from here.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, every time that we think we've started to peel back all the layers, there's more layers to peel back in the story that we're being told.
Yeah, exactly. And like every time I do one of these episodes, it gets me excited to reread the entire series again, and it's good because I've forgotten most of what else happens. I can remember a few certain beats, but I've forgotten how you get to those beats and who does what to make that happen. And I'm really interested in sitting down and rereading the whole thing again from start to finish.
Yeah, and it does. It's the pacing is nice. Like we slowly, um, it kind of hits us right away. This, we're here to deal with witches and the supernatural, and you know, some unsettled town folk, and then it kind of like slows down and then slowly ramps back up over time. And we just kind of have that like increasing like up, and then we'll have a little bit of down, and then we'll go back up, and we just have this like increasing rhythm as things just continue to escalate.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and like even here we're getting, how Emmy and her dad are getting visitors, and uh, what's his name again? Is it Rhea or Raya?
I think it's Raya.
Yeah, Raya and Bernice show up, and Raya's obviously having a serious discussion with Pa, and starting to hint that there's something not normal about Emmy.
Yeah.
And obviously, with where the story starts, they're hinting at some kind of a connection to Hester, but whether that's she's family, she might be a daughter or a granddaughter that nobody knew about, or what, isn't immediately given clarity.
Yeah, we're given that hook, and they want to pull us along a little bit before they let us like really have what they're dangling in front of us.
Yeah, exactly. And then she goes for this walk in the woods, which again is just a gorgeous scene with all these warm greens and yellows and reds.
Yeah. And and
And then
and and forests are hard to draw.
tell me about it.
It is forests are like horses. They're one of those things where we all think we know what it looks like, but as soon as you sit down to draw it, you're like, actually, what?
Yeah, I'm trying to do. There's just one panel of a forest scene with a waterfall that I'm trying to do at the moment, and my brain just keeps sort of drawing every other panel on the page
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
avoiding
it's a
that.
daunting panel.
It's like, no, I should probably just get into it, but I am sort
You
of,
gotta go there.
yeah, avoiding it a little bit, but I got to get there eventually. Yeah, and then she comes across this little boy just staring into the creek, and he takes off, and suddenly Amy loses track of him, and there's this almost a tunnel through the bramble thicket.
Yeah. We get some very I mean, I personally get some very like fairy tale Alice in Wonderland kind of
Mm.
esque vibes here, but it's not like it's a lot more foreboding feeling,
Yeah,
you
it
know?
is. It looks ominous, rather than just being like a little bush with maybe a couple of thorns that you're gonna pop out through on the other side and be somewhere magical. It looks like it's closing in, and it almost looks like it's attacking Emmy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a fun time to be had.
And then she's crawling through, and we see the clothes dangling from the thorns, and the stuffed rabbit, and they're bloodied, but Emmy doesn't notice it, and so she keeps crawling. And as she emerges into the smaller sort of, not exactly a clearing, but a space, there's
Yeah.
blood everywhere.
Yeah,
And
and we're
presented with the little boy. Or
yeah,
what's.
and we very much have, like, you see Emmy's face in that last panel, and we're kind of, I think we're left with that same feeling of like, oh, what is what? Like, I
Yeah, I
mean,
think.
obviously you think something not quite right is going on with this little boy. We're reading kind of a horror comic, and that,
Yeah. Knew something wasn't going to be right, but I wasn't. Well, the
yeah.
first time I read it, I wasn't expecting this. And I think I visibly looked like this while I was reading it the first time. Because I
Yeah.
remember Robin turning to me and going, "What? What?" Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm reading a horror story. Don't worry about it. You don't want to see this right now.
Yeah, and we're they do a good job of drawing us into that moment of kind of like the proverbial page turner of like, okay, where are we going, where are we going, where are we going, and giving us these moments where we can just kind of hang on what's happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And then obviously, like, this skin starts making noises, which is disturbing.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's the final panel with Emmy's face and how Tyler has surrounded her completely with black. So the only thing to focus on is Emmy's feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the end of the, like, issue of, like, the serial issue.
Yeah,
It's
there's
obviously not the end of the volume, but
no, but yeah, that's where number one ends, and it's just like ends with this little story here of being warned by the power in her blood, which sort of re-cements that connection to the witch. But still, like, what is the connection? We don't really find out until a couple more issues in, I think. And even then, it's still a mystery.
yeah, I think we start to get a sense of, like, the next issue, things start to escalate. We see kind of, she's having more dreams, and there's more going on with the townspeople.
Yeah,
Um, and we do get a sense of there being some connection there. We do continue to have the sense deepened of there being some connection there, but it's not until pretty late in the book that we know kind of what's going on.
yeah. And I can't even remember how far in it turns out when we get the actual reveal. There's like the reveal, and then it turns out that what we thought was the reveal was wrong.
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's enough of those that I'm trying to even think of which one you would be talking about.
Well, like who we thought she was, and then it turns out that she's actually someone else.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and I mean, there's a mythos to the world
Yeah, there
that
is.
these
Yeah,
books are set in.
yeah,
And we're fed that over the course of all of these volumes.
yeah. There's an
Um,
extensive history.
yeah, and it's really great. I haven't gotten a chance to read all of them, but they've taken the opportunity of having this world to play with the mythos and let other people create stories in it. I
Yeah,
think,
at the end of this issue, there's the baptism one-page story as well. where they're baptizing the little boy in the river, and he just vanishes.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Oh, it might only be in the single issues, but at the
It's
end
possible,
here,
yeah.
like, we get that final scene with Emmy, and then we flick over, and there's Tales of Harrow County, and this first story is called Baptism, and it's sort of telling a story about Kettle Creek, where she found this little boy's skin, and how people don't like to go there, and they don't do baptisms in Kettle Creek, and yeah, they're baptizing this boy, and they're saying that the boy didn't like the water, um, and bam, suddenly he's like yanked away from the guys doing the baptism, but also immediately the water is completely still, and it's completely clear. So you could see to the bottom, and there shouldn't be anything there. But something took the boy. And then that's it. That's all you know.
Yeah.
And just sort of cements that strangeness of this world. And that something isn't right in this area.
Yeah, I think there's a trade paperback. It's either coming out soon or it just came out recently of collected stories of Tales of Harrow County.
Oh, cool.
I know that there's a couple issues of the a couple volumes of like the book trade paperbacks that'll have some of those sprinkled in places, but there's not really a collection of them. And I think they have collected them. The Tales of Harrow County is the book that's coming out is, I think it takes place maybe 10 years after this story ends, and it focuses on Bernice.
Oh. Actually, I think I remember seeing some posts about that on Twitter, that there was something new coming. So that's exciting.
I'm pretty excited to get to read that, because the mythos of this, the mythos that they build of this world and the places we go, I mean, it's not really a spoiler. It's more of a teaser of the family.
Yeah.
And that whole mythos. Really, yeah. Why do the Haints of Harrow County, why are they drawn to her, and what are all the Haints, and like kind of this, like, it's one of those worlds that you could have one of those little encyclopedia books about, of just like the illustrations and little entries of things that never come up in the story at all, but cool. That they've thought about.
Yeah, and because like the world is so rich that that material is out there somewhere, that there's so much stuff that never made it into the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm hoping to have Cullen on the show sometime. I have sent him a message, so we'll see what happens. That would be really cool.
That would be so rad. It would be cool to hear him. It would be cool to hear him talk about other people's work and like what he thinks about it and how he relates to it.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what book he wants to talk about.
Yeah, I agree. That would be pretty cool.
Alrighty, well, that's the end of issue 1, and we're a little bit over an hour, which is great. We had a lot to talk about. So do you want to just recap what you've got going on in the world right now and where people can find you?
So for the most part, I've been pretty quiet on the social media lately, but you can find my Twitter is @lizardbreath. That's kind of hard to spell.
It is in the chat.
It's with the 2 R's. Pretty much, if you're on any platform anywhere and you search that name and find someone, it's almost definitely me. Right now the big project that I'm looking towards is my story in A Cold Dark Future, which is the anthology, first anthology being put out by Black Hole Comics. And you should definitely check out Black Hole Comics. They've put out a bunch of short stories and a couple short comics already on their website. They do some rad stuff. They're very focused on giving people opportunities in comics who maybe wouldn't normally have an opportunity in comics, um,
I'll
and
just go pop that
publishing
in the
in
chat
general.
too.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, that's the next project I'm going to be working on through probably through the rest of the winter.
Yep,
Um,
that sounds really cool.
and I'm excited to, I guess, probably post some little teasers here and there on my social media while I'm working on it.
That sounds really great. I'm excited to sit down and finally do some actual writing on the anthology that I want to do next year. Frankie's going to jump on that with me. Uh,
Oh,
uh,
that's exciting.
yeah, it's going to be like maybe 10 stories with different
Okay.
writers and artists, but it's going to be sort of set in a world that I created.
Oh, cool.
So I'll sort of set the rules for the sandbox, and then people can tell their own stories in the sandbox.
Oh, that's great. Anthologies like that are a lot of fun.
Yeah, I thought that would be a really interesting way to do it. I'm not sure if I'm going to write one or two stories because, like, I want to write and draw the origin story, obviously, because it's this character that I came up with and sets the tone for the world. But I also really want to write something and see somebody else draw it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I always think it's interesting when you see comic artists become writers and what that work looks like.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And for anyone watching that hasn't seen my stuff before, you can find me as Sean Sunday Art on all platforms. My Discord is in the chat. You can come and hang out and find out who's coming up next on No Capes. Continue the discussion about the books that we talked about, or suggest books for the future. If you want to learn more about making comics, there's stuff like that in there. We talk about RPGs. I run games for people on my stream, so I'll be recruiting players there sometimes. And also the Band of Badgers, who are a really cool UK group. I gave them their own channel in there, and they're always looking for guest players for their Rise of the Rune Lords and Tomb of Annihilation show. So
Cool.
jump in there, find their channel, and put your hand up if you want to be a guest on their show. I played with them 2 weeks ago now on Tomb of Annihilation and had a great time. I played Rec Carnell, who was 1000% a ripoff of Rick O'Connell, and it was amazing. And I'll be playing in their Rise of the Rune Lords campaign in January, which is going to be really fun. That'll be my first time playing Pathfinder.
That sounds great.
And obviously, stay tuned for future episodes of No Capes. It's every Friday, 10 a.m. Australia time, Brisbane time specifically, which is depending on whether you've got daylight savings or not, 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. Eastern time. And no, next week is Christopher Sabella is my guest. So that is what I'm really looking forward to because Crowded is one of my favorite comics right now.
Ooh.
I had Ted and Ro from the art team on, and we talked about Witch Hat Atelier earlier this year. Chris is coming on next week, and I can't remember what book we're talking about. What book are we talking about? Let me just check. Let me check. Uh, Assassination.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be really fun. And then I think it's the week after is when I've got Sweeney Boo on, and we're talking about. Yeah, it is. Middle West. So those are the next two episodes that are coming out, and that's going to be really fun. And I'm actually doing Self-Made the week after. If you haven't read that one, it's a really interesting sci-fi one about AI and becoming self-aware and actual self-realization in the physical world. Self/made. And actually, that's the final episode for season 1.
Oh yeah, this looks really good.
Yeah, so this is the fourth last episode of the season. So that's
Well,
going to be
I
really.
appreciate you having me on.
I
It
appreciate you
was
coming
rad to
on.
come talk.
Oh, sorry, I lie. I am recording a bonus surprise episode on the weekend, which will be released for Christmas. I'm just not recording on Christmas. I'm just going to record it and schedule it to go live on Christmas.
Surprise.
And that's with Fell, actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, and what book are we talking about? I remember it also. I think we're talking about Eternal by Ryan K. Lindsay, actually. If I remember rightly. Where are you, Fell? Where are you? I've really got to keep my stuff more organized for myself. Like
Do your pre-show notes?
I do have pre-show notes, but then like I keep everything in places that are very
Oh,
specific
yeah.
places. But then when I want to get to them in a hurry, I got to remember where they are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yes, Eternal. Yeah, which is a really cool one-shot Viking story by my friend Ryan Lindsay, who's an Australian comic writer. Um, and his other book was actually the one that Frankie and I did for episode 1, which is now episode 0.5 and got thrown to the side because I balked it. But that was She at the Tower of All That Is Known. Is his latest release with Chris Panda. And it was a really cool book. Where is it hiding? I always have to show it off when I mention it because it has the single coolest comic cover I've seen in a long time. I know you're in here. No, what have I done with it? I've made it. Oh, there it is. There it is. There it is. Yeah, I love this cover.
Oh, yeah. I remember
Yeah.
watching you and Frankie get very excited about this.
Yeah. Yeah, the
Yeah,
three-layer die cut cover. And obviously,
it's extremely good.
almost every single person who backed the Kickstarter and got the hardcover has been doing the.
I mean, yeah. You can't help but want to do something like that. I mean, it's clever. It's great. I love seeing when people push the designs of their book like that.
Yeah, it's been really neat, and I was stoked when we got the announcement that Frankie was upgrading Starless Daydream to hardcover too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, actually, yeah. Since we both worked with Frankie White, for anyone who didn't catch the start of the show, go check out Frankie White on Twitter. All of his comics are great. We've both got work coming out one coming out soon, which was really great. It was a fundraiser for the Trevor Project, and I can't wait to get my hands on those copies.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty excited. Yeah. Yeah, it was a rad project, and especially if you like science fiction and giant robots, Frankie is a person to follow. And pay attention to.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what Frankie writes for the world that I'm putting together because it's like 70s, but not really. It's
Okay.
actually set in a near future, but on this version of Earth, we never aesthetically left the 70s.
Right. That good retro future.
Yeah, so like all the tech is really advanced, but it all looks super 70s. That's like the main core rule I set for this universe, and that's as far as I've gotten so far.
I mean, it's a good starting point.
Yeah, the main character is Teddy Valentine, and he was just like I've got a basic story for him going. He was sort of just like a pencil pusher. Didn't really do that well through field tests and stuff in this agency called Network. And then something happened. He was horribly maimed, and to keep him from dying, they had to give him some cybernetics.
Okay.
He ends up with that old school, and I actually came up with this guy, the idea for this guy before I even had sort of read Saga or watched Dead Leaves and stuff like that. But he's got that retro TV head aesthetic.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
And so that's why I went with Teddy Valentine. And
yeah.
then
That's pretty good.
the bad guy from the opposing agency is Fox Newsom. He's an agent of Murdoch.
Okay.
So that sort of sets the tone that I'm going for. It's going to be stupid, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be a really schlocky sort of spy story.
This sounds like a pretty good time. I'm always
Yeah.
up for some TV heads and retro futures.
Yeah, I love retro futuristic stuff. It doesn't really matter what age it is. If it's retro futuristic, you've got me.
Yeah, I mean it's a whole world of it's like a whole sandbox of visual aesthetics and storytelling that you just don't see a whole lot. Like, we kind of have our genres of futurism that we look at now, and then
Yeah.
you
I
you
tell
change the
you,
rules and say it's can only be this time period and
yeah,
create something
exactly.
new.
I tell you something that I have been loving that's been really rising in popularity 2019, 2020, which is the Afrofuturism.
Yeah, there's so much good stuff.
Yeah. Swords Fall, the RPG that's being made, is an Afrofuturistic story, and they did a graphic novel set in that world as well, which I'm going to pick up soon. They've got a PDF version. So you can find that. Swords Fall 1 on Twitter is the account for that. Really looking forward to reading that and hopefully having, the creators on the show at some point next year as well.
I didn't know that they had made a graphic novel. I'm gonna have to look for that. The creative team for that whole RPG is they're just all amazing people to like follow and pay
Yeah,
attention to. They're doing some really cool stuff.
they really are. They've been posting about it really recently on the Twitter, so it shouldn't take you long to scroll down and find the link to the PDF.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go check that out for anyone that's watching. And thank you again, Liz, for coming on the show today and giving me your time, especially when we had some time zone fuckery that confused us.
I think that was more my fault than anything.
I don't mind, as I was just glad that you were able to make it. I really
Yeah,
appreciate
so am
you
I.
still rolling with it and coming on. It's been a great time talking about this book. It's been a great time talking to you after obviously being introduced to you through Frankie. And I've had a wonderful episode. And everybody go check out Liz on social media, check out Frankie, and come back next week for the next episode of No Capes. This has been No Capes, the talk show where we talk about creator-owned comics with creators who own comics. Bye for now.